The rain fell relentlessly on the asphalt of Fifth Avenue, transforming the lights of the buildings into colorful blurs reflected in the puddles. Sarah Johnson crossed her arms tightly against her chest, trying in vain to protect herself from the cold wind cutting through the New York night. The last bus had left 5 minutes ago, and her cell phone, with its battery completely drained, wouldn't allow her to call a ride-sharing app. She was stuck, soaked, and exhausted after another day of working 2 jobs. "Need some help?" The male voice came from a black car that had parked beside her. The driver lowered the window, revealing a pair of intensely blue eyes that contrasted with his straight black hair. "It's late to be waiting for a bus in this rain," he added with a gentle smile that illuminated his well-defined features. "Would you accept a ride from a stranger in a situation like this? Even knowing the risks, there are moments when instinct tells us we can trust someone we've just met." That was exactly what Sarah felt in that instant. "Normally I'd say no, but—" Sarah hesitated, observing the immaculate interior of the car and the genuinely concerned expression of the man. The rain intensified, as if forcing her decision. "Where are you headed?" "I'm going to Brooklyn. I can drop you off on the way, if that helps," he responded, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow made Sarah feel safer. "I live in Brooklyn too," she said, surprised by the coincidence. After a few seconds of hesitation, she opened the passenger door and got in. "I'm Sarah." "Michael," he introduced himself, extending his hand for a formal handshake before turning his attention back to the traffic. "Working late on Fifth Avenue? You look tired." Sarah adjusted herself in the leather seat, feeling the heat from the car's heater chase away the cold that had settled in her bones. 2 jobs and night classes. The perfect recipe for looking like a walking zombie," she replied with a tired but good-humored smile. "Admirable," Michael commented, skillfully maneuvering through the congested streets. "What field do you work in?" "I'm an administrative assistant at Johnson Construction during the day, and at night I clean at the Integra Enterprises building." She noticed how her simple and slightly damp clothes contrasted with the luxury of the car. "And you?" "I work in business management," Michael replied, with an almost imperceptible hesitation. "I'm also coming back from a meeting that lasted longer than it should have." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but charged with a mutual curiosity that neither seemed willing to fully explore. The rain hit against the window, creating a melody that filled the space between them. "There's a coffee shop near here that's open late," said Michael, breaking the silence. "I don't know about you, but I could use some caffeine before heading home. Care to join me?" The question caught Sarah by surprise. She knew she should refuse. The next morning she would wake up at 5 to catch the first bus to work. But there was something in the kindness of those blue eyes, in the way he seemed genuinely interested in her words, that made her respond. Coffee would be perfect, as long as it's quick. The Forest Cafe, small and cozy, seemed like an oasis of calm amid the storm. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the smell of cheese bread coming out of the oven, creating a welcoming atmosphere. Michael ordered a strong espresso, while Sarah opted for a latte. "So, Sarah, is it difficult to balance 2 jobs and studies?" Michael asked, after taking a sip of his coffee. "It's tough, but necessary," she replied, observing the details of the man in front of her. Despite his elegant business attire, there was a simplicity in his gestures, a genuine attention that didn't seem rehearsed. "I'm finishing my business administration degree. Another 1.5 years if all goes well. And after—" "That? After?" Sarah smiled, playing with the spoon in her cup. "I want to start my own business. Something small at first, maybe in consulting for small businesses." Michael leaned slightly forward, genuinely interested. "Tell me more about that." During the next hour, Sarah surprised herself by talking about her dreams, plans, and ideas, with an ease she rarely experienced with people she had just met. Michael listened attentively, asking insightful questions and making comments that demonstrated knowledge of the subject. When they finally said goodbye, with Michael insisting on paying the bill and dropping her off at home, Sarah felt a strange mixture of excitement and caution. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Sarah," said Michael, when they stopped in front of the small building where she lived. "Perhaps we could meet again, without depending on rain or missed buses." Sarah hesitated for a moment, divided between prudence and curiosity. "Perhaps," she finally answered, exchanging phone numbers before saying goodbye. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she couldn't imagine that this casual encounter would completely change the course of her life. 3 days later, Sarah crossed the main lobby of the imposing Integra Enterprises building, carrying her cleaning supplies. As always, the executives and administrative staff passed by her without really seeing her. She was part of the landscape, invisible despite being essential. She had grown accustomed to this feeling, though she had never made peace with it. While waiting for the service elevator, her mind wandered to Michael. They had exchanged a few messages since that night, light and unpretentious conversations that somehow were the best moments of her exhausting days. He had suggested a weekend meeting, and Sarah found herself smiling at the thought, even knowing she should keep her feet on the ground. The main elevator opened beside her, and Sarah cast a distracted glance inside. Freezing instantly, there among 3 suited executives was Michael, not the Michael in jeans and a dress shirt she had met, but a Michael in an impeccably tailored suit, with a leather briefcase in hand and a serious expression she didn't recognize. Their eyes met for a brief second before the doors closed. Sarah's heart raced. That look, surprise, guilt, something indefinable, said more than 1,000 words could express. When she finally reached the 20th floor, her mind was in turmoil. It couldn't be a coincidence. Mechanically, she began to clean the empty offices, trying to organize her thoughts. It was then that she saw, through the half-open door of the conference room, Michael sitting at the head of the table, conducting a presentation. "As the new CEO of Integra, I can assure you that our vision is not just to expand, but to transform the market," he was saying, with an authority that made Sarah instinctively step back. CEO. He wasn't just an employee, he was the owner, the boss of bosses. The man who technically paid her miserable salary. Sarah felt her legs weaken. Had she been deceived? Had he been amusing himself by playing with the cleaning lady, watching her talk about her dreams while internally laughing at her naivety? Shame and anger mixed in her chest in a way that made her nauseous. She finished her shift on autopilot, avoiding at all costs any area where she might encounter him again. Upon arriving home, she found 3 messages from him on her cell phone. "Sarah, we need to talk. I can explain. Please give me a chance to speak with you." What would you do in Sarah's place? Would you give Michael a chance to explain why he hid who he really was? Or would you consider this an irreparable breach of trust? 3 days passed without her responding. Michael sent a few more messages, each more concerned than the last, but Sarah remained firm in her silence. How could she trust someone who began their relationship with such a fundamental lie? On the 4th night, as she was leaving work, now taking extra care to avoid the path Michael might take, she found a small box in her locker. Inside, a card and a flash drive. "I didn't lie about who I am, I just omitted what I do. If there's still a chance, watch the video, Michael." At home, curiosity overcame resistance. On the flash drive, a video of Michael sitting in what appeared to be his home. "Sarah, I should have been honest from the beginning. When I offered you a ride, I had no idea where you worked. I only discovered it when we got out of the car, and I recognized the uniform of the outsourced cleaning company. I should have said something at that moment, but..." He ran his hand through his hair, visibly uncomfortable. "It had been so long since someone talked to me like a normal person, not as the CEO of the company, that I couldn't interrupt that moment. It was selfish of me. But nothing we talked about was a lie. None of what I felt was false. Sarah turned off the video, feeling confused. Part of her wanted to believe him, but the other part, the one that grew up distrusting privileged people who would never understand her reality, kept her cautious. The next morning, at her day job, she received a message from an unknown number. "Miss Johnson, I am Mrs. Martha, secretary to Mr. Michael Anderson. He requests a private meeting today at 7 p.m. at the Forest Cafe. He will understand if you cannot attend, but would very much appreciate your presence." Formal, distant, the opposite of the warm messages they had exchanged before. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Perhaps it was better this way. Michael was in his world, and she in hers. After hours of debating with herself, Sarah finally decided to go to the meeting, if only to end that story definitively. She carefully chose a simple but elegant outfit, a blue dress she had bought on sale, determined to keep her dignity intact. The Forest Cafe was almost empty when she arrived. Michael was already waiting for her, sitting at the same table as before, this time wearing jeans and a simple shirt, like on the first night. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing up to greet her. "I wasn't sure if you would show up." "Neither was I," replied Sarah, unable to disguise the tension in her voice. "Why did you bring me here, Michael? Or should I call you Mr. Anderson?" A shadow of pain crossed his face. "Michael, please. Always Michael to you." "Why the charade?" Sarah asked directly. Refusing the coffee he offered. "Did you have fun watching the cleaning lady dream big?" "There was no charade, Sarah," he said, keeping his voice calm despite the evident frustration. "I met you as a person, not as an employee, and that's exactly why I didn't mention my position, because, for the first time in a long time, someone was conversing with me without expectations or ulterior motives." Sarah remained silent, observing him attentively. There was a vulnerability in his blue eyes that seemed authentic, but she had been deceived before. "I understand your distrust," he continued, "and I accept that I made a mistake by not clarifying everything from the beginning. But I'd like you to know who I really am, beyond the title." Michael then told his story, how he had built the company with his father, who had passed away 2 years ago, how he struggled to maintain the family legacy while trying to modernize management, how he constantly felt lonely despite always being surrounded by people. He talked about the pressure, the sleepless nights, the difficult decisions that affected hundreds of employees. "When I found you that night, I was coming back from a particularly difficult meeting. I had just decided to close a branch that wasn't performing well, which meant laying off 20 people. You were the first person in weeks who made me feel normal, human." Sarah absorbed his words in silence. Part of her wanted to believe, but the fear persisted. "We're from different worlds, Michael. You're the CEO, I'm the cleaning lady. That's not going to change. Titles don't define who we are," he replied, extending his hand across the table, without touching her. "Only what we choose to do with them." "It's easy to say that when you're at the top," Sarah retorted, feeling her voice falter. "You're right," Michael admitted, surprising her. "I will never completely understand your reality. But that doesn't mean I can't learn, or that I don't want to try." Sarah looked into his eyes, trying to find any sign of falsehood. Instead, she saw only sincerity and perhaps a loneliness that mirrored her own. "One step at a time," she finally said. "No promises." Michael smiled, the first genuine smile since they had met again. No promises, just possibilities. When they left the cafe that night, both knew they were walking into unknown and potentially dangerous territory. But sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. The following weeks brought a curious routine for Sarah and Michael. They met discreetly in cafes away from work, talking for hours about everything and nothing. In the Integra building, they maintained professional distance. She continued to be the invisible employee, and he, the respected CEO. This arrangement, although strange, allowed them to know different facets of each other without the pressure of external expectations. On a sunny Saturday, Michael invited Sarah to visit Central Park. Nothing formal, just a stroll, he assured her by message. Sarah accepted, knowing it would be the first time they met in daylight in public without the protection of darkness or discreet corners. The park was teeming with life, families having picnics, couples holding hands, groups of friends biking. Sarah suddenly felt conscious of her simple clothes compared to Michael's branded sneakers and expensive sunglasses. Still, there was something comforting in the way he treated her, as an equal, without condescension or artificiality. "My father used to bring me here every Sunday," commented Michael, as they walked along the edge of the lake, even after the company started to grow and he barely had time to breathe. He said it was our sacred moment. "Were you close?" asked Sarah, noticing how his face softened when speaking of his father. "Very. He built everything from scratch, you know. Started as an office boy for a construction company, saved every penny, studied at night. Not much different from what you're doing now." Michael paused, observing two ducks swimming peacefully. "I think that's why I felt so connected to you from the beginning. You remind me of him." Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. It was the first time Michael had mentioned a connection between them that went beyond immediate attraction. They sat on a bench in the shade of a leafy tree, sharing pistachio ice cream. The conversation flowed naturally until Michael received a call. "I need to take this," he said, stepping away a few paces. Sarah observed his posture change immediately, shoulders raised, voice firmer, concentrated expression. It was fascinating and a little intimidating to see the transformation from the relaxed Michael to the executive Michael Anderson. When he returned, his expression was tense. "Sorry, it's a situation with an important client. I'll need to resolve this personally." "No problem, I understand," replied Sarah, trying to hide her disappointment. "Work is work." "No, you don't understand," Michael said, gently holding her arm. "I want you to come with me." "What?" "It's a last-minute business dinner. I would normally take my assistant, but—" He hesitated, as if measuring his words. "I'd like you to go, as my companion." Sarah felt panic growing in her chest. "Michael, I can't just show up at a business dinner. I don't have appropriate clothes. I don't know how to behave in those environments. You're intelligent, articulate, and almost have a degree in business administration. Believe me, you'll be more prepared than many CEOs I know." He smiled, that smile that always disarmed Sarah. "As for the clothes, we can solve that. If you want, of course. No pressure." And so, 3 hours later, Sarah found herself entering the luxurious porterhouse restaurant wearing an elegant black dress that Michael had insisted on buying. "Consider it an investment in your future consulting career." Her blonde hair was tied in a sophisticated bun, and a thin layer of makeup enhanced her blue eyes. What would you do at this moment? Would you accept entering Michael's world with confidence? Or would you retreat in the face of the pressure of being in an environment so different from your usual one? "Relax," murmured Michael, guiding her with a gentle hand on her back. "Be yourself. That's why I invited you." The dinner gathered 4 executives from a Japanese multinational interested in a partnership with Integra. Sarah was introduced simply as Sarah Johnson, consultant, without further explanation. Initially tense, she was surprised to discover that she could follow and even contribute to the conversation, especially when the subject turned to market strategies for small businesses, a topic she knew well thanks to her studies. "Ms. Johnson raised an interesting point," said Takahashi, the oldest of the Japanese executives, after Sarah made a comment about how local small businesses could benefit from the partnership. "Fresh perspective, Anderson-san. Your company values diverse voices." Michael smiled at her, a look that mixed pride and something deeper that Sarah couldn't define. For a moment she felt she belonged there, not as the cleaning lady pretending to be someone important, but as a professional whose ideas had value. When they left the restaurant, it was already past midnight. Michael was visibly satisfied. "You were amazing," he said, as they waited for the driver to bring the car. "You completely won over Takahashi, and he's not easily impressed." "It was luck," Sarah replied, although internally she knew it wasn't just that. "The topic was something I knew. It wasn't luck. It was talent, intelligence, and preparation." Michael moved closer, lightly touching her face. "You are extraordinary, Sarah Johnson, in any context." The kiss that followed was soft and brief, but loaded with promises. When they separated, Sarah felt dizzy, not just from the kiss, but from the confusion of emotions that invaded her. That night had shown that she could navigate his world, but at what cost? Was she losing her essence, letting herself be molded to fit a reality that wasn't her own? "What are you thinking about?" asked Michael, noticing her distant expression as they headed to the car. "About who I am when I'm with you," Sarah answered honestly. "And if that person is real or just a role I'm playing." Michael stopped, observing her with intensity. "You are real, Sarah. More real than any person I've ever met. That's why—" He hesitated, as if reconsidering his words. "That's why," she insisted. "That's why I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. Sarah felt her heart race, divided between euphoria and fear. Deep down, she knew she was falling in love too, but the gulf between their worlds seemed insurmountable. "We need to take it slow," she finally said, holding his hand. "There's a lot at stake." Michael nodded, respecting her space. On the way home, they talked about lighter subjects, but both knew they had crossed an invisible line. There was no going back. The reflection in the mirror still seemed strange to Sarah. 2 weeks after the dinner at Porterhouse, her wardrobe had been subtly renewed with pieces that Michael insisted on calling professional investments. She had refused personal gifts, but accepted his suggestions about some more versatile clothes that could serve both for future job interviews and special occasions. The woman who stared back at her now wore a well-cut blazer over a simple blouse and dress pants, a middle ground between the simplicity of her old clothes and the elegance that would be expected of someone close to Michael. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and light makeup highlighted her blue eyes. "You're still you," she murmured to herself, a mantra she had been repeating frequently. But the doubt persisted. Was she changing to please Michael, or to adapt to a future she really wanted? Her cell phone vibrated with a message from him. "Dinner at 8 p.m. I have news." Sarah smiled involuntarily. Despite the complications, moments with Michael had become the brightest part of her days. He never tried to hide the relationship, but also respected her need to maintain discretion in the workplace. To the outside world, they remained just a CEO and an employee who occasionally crossed paths in the corridors. That night, Michael took her to a small and charming restaurant in Greenwich Village, quite different from the luxurious places they frequented when he had business commitments. The atmosphere was relaxed, with rustic wooden tables and low lights. "I like it here," commented Sarah, immediately feeling at ease. "It seems authentic." "Like you," Michael replied, taking her hand on the table. There was an intensity in his gaze that Sarah recognized. He was nervous, which was rare. "I have a proposal for you." Sarah's heart raced. It couldn't be what she was thinking, could it? They had been together for just over a month, though the intensity of the connection made it seem much longer. "A professional proposal," he quickly clarified, noticing her reaction. "We're creating a new department in the company, focused on consulting for small businesses. Exactly what you said you'd like to do in the future." "And?" Sarah asked cautiously, though she already suspected where this would lead. "And I want you to lead this department after you graduate, of course. In the meantime, you can start as an intern, learning the processes and contributing ideas." Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. On one hand, it was an incredible opportunity, exactly the type of work she dreamed of doing. On the other, "Are you offering me a job on merit or because we're together?" she asked directly, her voice firmer than expected. Michael seemed genuinely hurt by the question. "On merit, obviously. You're a qualified, Sarah. You have vision, intelligence, and a unique perspective that our executives don't possess." He took a deep breath before continuing. "But I understand how this might appear, and that's why I formulated the proposal so that I wouldn't be your direct supervisor. You would report to the Director of Innovation, Teresa Miller. She doesn't know about us, and she was the one who suggested your name after seeing your resume." "My resume?" Sarah frowned, confused. "I didn't send a resume for any position." Michael had the decency to look embarrassed. "I shared your resume with her. After that night at Porterhouse, Teresa asked about my consultant. I mentioned that you were still in college but had potential, and she asked to see your academic record. You did that without consulting me?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "It was wrong, I know. I should have asked your permission first." Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Sarah had already learned to recognize as a sign of his frustration with himself. But Teresa was genuinely impressed. "Your grades are excellent, and your administrative experience, even in simpler functions, demonstrates commitment and work ethic." Sarah remained silent, processing all of this. Part of her was furious with Michael for making decisions about her professional life without consulting her. Another part was excited about the possibility of finally having a real chance to grow professionally. "And if it doesn't work out, between us, I mean," she finally asked, "would I lose the opportunity?" "Absolutely not," Michael replied without hesitation. "The contract would be formal, with all legal protections. Our personal relationship has nothing to do with it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "In fact, if it makes you more comfortable, we can keep our relationship secret for now. You would earn your place on your own merit, without anyone being able to question it." Sarah considered the proposal. It was tempting, very tempting, but something inside her resisted. "I don't want a relationship in hiding, Michael, nor do I want a job that seems like a favor," she finally said. "If we're going to continue together, it needs to be out in the open. And if I'm going to work in your company, I need to know it's on merit, not privilege." Michael nodded slowly, respecting her position. "What do you suggest then?" "Let's take one step at a time," Sarah finally said. "I want to have a formal interview with Teresa, without your interference. If she truly thinks I'm qualified, I'll accept the internship. As for the two of us—" She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I prefer that we maintain discretion at first, not out of shame, but so that I have a chance to prove my professional worth before people start talking." Michael studied her face for a moment before nodding. "Fair, very fair. I'll ask Teresa to schedule an official interview, and I won't be involved in the process. You have my word." "Thank you for understanding," Sarah smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "This means a lot to me." "You mean a lot to me," he replied, gently squeezing her hand. When they returned to the car, the atmosphere between them had transformed. The tension had given way to a renewed complicity based on mutual respect for each other's choices and boundaries. Perhaps it was possible, after all, to find a middle ground between their very different worlds. However, at the back of her mind, Sarah couldn't completely silence the voice that asked, was she entering a game where the cards were already marked? And if she was, would she be able to play by her own rules? Teresa Miller's office was a study in elegant efficiency, minimalist but welcoming, with strategically positioned plants and an entire wall of windows offering a panoramic view of New York. Sarah nervously adjusted the collar of her white blouse as she waited, trying not to think about Michael 2 floors above, probably as anxious as she was. The interview with Teresa had been scheduled for 2 p.m., but it was already past 2:15, and there was no sign of the director. Typical corporate world, thought Sarah, where the time of the powerful was worth more than that of others. She took a deep breath, remembering that she wasn't there as a supplicant, but as a qualified professional. "Sorry for the delay," said a firm voice, as a woman in her 50s entered the room. Teresa Miller had grey hair cut in a precise bob and wore an impeccable navy blue suit. Without beating around the bush, she sat down across from her. "Last-minute emergencies. The test of a good executive is knowing which fire to put out first." Sarah smiled politely. "I completely understand." Teresa observed her attentively, as if evaluating not just her words, but her posture, her confidence, her essence. "So, Sarah, Michael spoke very highly of you, but I prefer to form my own opinions. Tell me why we should create an entire department based on your ideas." The frankness of the question caught Sarah by surprise, but she quickly composed herself. For the next hour, she presented her vision of how Integra could benefit from creating a division specialized in small businesses, not just as social responsibility, but as a long-term market strategy. She talked about models she had studied, successful international cases, and how her own experience seeing both sides of the coin, the corporate and the small entrepreneur, gave her a unique perspective. Teresa occasionally interrupted with incisive questions, some clearly designed to destabilize her, but Sarah remained firm. When the director finally closed her folder, there was a gleam of respect in her eyes. "You have potential, Sarah. I won't lie. There's a lot to learn, and the path won't be easy. But I see something in you that I don't find in many young people who arrive here full of expensive diplomas and zero real-life experience." Teresa leaned forward. "The question is, are you ready to leave behind what you were and become who you can be?" Sarah hesitated, realizing what was implicit in the question. "If you're referring to my current job, I'm referring to everything," Teresa interrupted, direct as always. "New opportunities require difficult decisions. You can't have one foot in each world." The conversation ended with a firm handshake and the promise of an answer in the coming days. Sarah left the building feeling simultaneously excited and conflicted. The opportunity was real. Teresa was too demanding to offer anything out of mere courtesy to the CEO, but the implications were more complex than she had imagined. That night, Michael appeared at her small apartment with a bottle of wine and a cautious smile. "So, how was it?" "Difficult, direct, honest," replied Sarah as she opened the bottle. "Teresa didn't make anything easy." "She never does," Michael laughed. "It was the same with me, even being the founder's son. Maybe, especially because I was the founder's son." They sat on the worn sofa in the small living room, Michael seeming strangely at ease in that environment, so different from his usual world. Through the open window, the sounds of the city created an irregular soundtrack. Horns, distant laughter, the occasional bark of a dog. "Teresa said something that made me think," commented Sarah, after a moment of comfortable silence, "about not being able to have one foot in each world." Michael frowned. "What did she mean by that?" "I think she meant everything." Sarah observed the red liquid in her glass, organizing her thoughts. "My current job, my lifestyle, maybe even us." "Us? What would we have to do with your career?" "Everything, Michael. If I accepted this internship, people would inevitably discover about us and immediately assume I got the position because of our relationship." Sarah met his gaze, determined to be completely honest. "And even if I could prove my worth afterward, that shadow would always be there." Michael placed his glass on the coffee table, the frustration evident on his face. "So, what are you suggesting? That we break up so you can accept the job? Or that you refuse the offer so we can stay together? Both options seem unfair." "I know," Sarah whispered, feeling tears form, but refusing to let them fall. "That's why it's a difficult choice. What would you do in Sarah's place? Would you choose the professional opportunity and give up the relationship with Michael, or would you follow your heart, even if it meant seeking another professional path? Michael stood up abruptly, walking to the window. For a moment, he just observed the city outside, his shoulders tense under his dress shirt. "There's a third option," he finally said without turning around. "One we couldn't consider before, but now—" "What option?" asked Sarah, confused. Michael turned, his blue eyes more intense than ever. "Leave Integra, not to work with me, but to work with us. I don't understand. I'm starting a parallel project, independent from Integra, a social startup incubator focused on low-income communities." The excitement grew in his voice as he spoke. "It's something I've been planning for months, inspired by the conversations we've had. You could lead the mentoring and development part, working directly with the entrepreneurs." Sarah stared at him, unable to hide her surprise. "You created this because of me, because of us," he gently corrected. "Because of everything I've learned seeing the world through your eyes, and because it's the kind of work that really matters. But it would be your money, your company. We'd still be in the same situation." Michael sat down again beside her, taking her hands in his. "It wouldn't be my company. It would be a non-profit organization with an independent board. I would be just one of the financial supporters, with no decision-making power over who is hired or how things work." He paused, allowing Sarah to absorb the idea. "You would be hired by the board, not by me. Your position would be entirely based on your qualifications." For a moment, Sarah was speechless. The proposal was tempting, perfectly aligned with her ideals and values, offering professional independence and the chance to really make a difference. But something still bothered her. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" she asked, unable to completely hide the hurt in her voice. "Because it wasn't ready," Michael answered honestly. "I'm still finalizing the details, gathering the right partners, ensuring everything is done the right way." He sighed. "And maybe I was afraid you'd think I was trying to buy you or impress you. I wanted you to know me as a person, not as someone who can start projects with a phone call." Sarah remained silent, processing everything that had been said. Part of her wanted to believe this was the answer, the perfect solution to her dilemma. Another part wondered if she wasn't being naive once again. "I need time," she finally said, "to think about all of this." Michael nodded, respecting her need for space. "All right, no pressure." He stood up, preparing to leave. "Just know that whatever your decision, my feelings for you won't change." After Michael left, Sarah remained sitting in the dark for a long time, observing the city lights through the window. The options before her were clear now, each with its own risks and rewards. She would have to trust her instinct to choose the right path. 3 days later, she was sitting in the same cafe where everything had begun, nervously waiting. She had made her decision after much reflection, research, and, to her own surprise, a long conversation with her mother, who had always been her most trusted advisor. When Michael entered, Sarah's heart raced, not just from the attraction she still felt for him, but from the importance of what she was about to say. He sat across from her, not trying to hide the anxiety in his eyes. "You've decided," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," replied Sarah, gathering courage. "I researched your foundation. I spoke with some people. It's an incredible project, Michael, truly transformative. But," he detected the hesitation in her voice, "but I need to follow my own path," she continued firmly. "I accepted Teresa's offer." Michael seemed genuinely surprised. "You're going to work at Integra?" "Yes. Teresa offered me an internship in the innovation department, not exactly the project we discussed, but something that could grow in that direction." Sarah took a deep breath. "And she knows about us. You told her?" "It wasn't necessary. Apparently we're less discreet than we thought." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "She said she wouldn't offer me the position if she didn't believe I was qualified, regardless of who I'm dating." Michael processed the information for a moment, then asked the question that hung between them. "And what about us?" "As for us," Sarah took his hand on the table, "I decided I deserve a chance to be happy in my personal life and in my professional life. I'm not going to let fear of others' judgment dictate my choices." She smiled softly. "It will be difficult, Michael. People will talk. Some doors might close. But if we work together, with honesty and respect, we can prove that what we have is real and valuable." The relief on Michael's face was visible. "You're right. It won't be easy. But nothing worthwhile ever is." For the next 6 months, Sarah navigated her new reality with determination and courage. The whispers in the hallways and skeptical glances gradually gave way to grudging respect, as her ideas and work ethic proved her value. Teresa became her strongest ally, treating her with the same demanding expectations she had for everyone, while Michael kept his promise to respect her professional space. In the office, they rarely spoke beyond the formal courtesies required by the environment. It was a complicated dance, but they were learning the steps. 6 months can change everything. Sarah observed the city from the 20th floor of Integra, now no longer as the invisible employee who cleaned empty rooms, but as part of the innovation team. Her reflection in the glass showed a transformed woman, not just by the more elegant clothes or her blonde hair, now cut in a modern style, but by the confidence in her gaze. "Meeting in 5 minutes," announced Mark, another intern on the team, poking his head through the door of the small office Sarah shared with 2 other colleagues. "Teresa wants to present the new project." Sarah nodded, closing the files on her computer. The so-called new project was what had kept her working late for the past few weeks. A training initiative for micro-entrepreneurs from peripheral communities, something that had started as a small idea of hers during a brainstorming meeting, and that surprisingly had gained Teresa's support. In the meeting room, the main directors were already present, including Michael, sitting discreetly in a corner. Their gazes met briefly, that silent connection that always existed between them, before Sarah took her place with the other junior members of the team. "Well, let's get straight to the point," Teresa began, efficient as always. "The Impulse project is ready for implementation. Our market research shows significant potential. The financial analysis projects, medium-term returns, and the initial partnerships are already aligned." She looked directly at Sarah. "Johnson, you present the structure." Sarah's heart raced. She hadn't expected to be called to present, especially in front of the entire board. But the months working with Teresa had taught her to always be ready for the unexpected. Rising with a calmness she didn't completely feel, she walked to the front of the room. "The Impulse project is structured on 3 main pillars," she began, her voice firmer than she had ever imagined possible in such a situation. For the next 15 minutes, she detailed the program, how it would work, the expected benefits for both the community and Integra, the costs involved, and the proposed success metrics. When she finished, the room remained silent for a few seconds. It was Michael who spoke first. "Impressive, Ms. Johnson, especially the long-term sustainability model." His tone was professional, but his eyes conveyed the pride he couldn't express openly. "I have just one suggestion: integration with the New Paths Foundation." Sarah blinked, surprised. The New Paths Foundation was Michael's personal project, the social startup incubator he had mentioned that night in her apartment. In the past months, the foundation had established itself as a respected, albeit small, organization focused on social entrepreneurship. "The foundation has experience with this target audience," continued Michael, now addressing everyone in the room. "We could form a strategic partnership, Integra offering the corporate structure and market access, the foundation bringing field knowledge and tested methodologies." Teresa nodded slowly, considering the idea. "Makes sense. Johnson, can you and your team analyze this possibility and present an integration plan next week?" "Of course," replied Sarah, trying to maintain a neutral expression while her mind rapidly processed what this would mean. Working directly with Michael's foundation would create a new level of complexity in her carefully constructed balance between personal and professional life. Later that day, she found Michael on the building's terrace, their secret spot for private conversations when they needed to discuss something during work hours. "You planned this," said Sarah straightforwardly, leaning on the railing beside him. Michael smiled, that smile she now knew so well. "Planned what?" "The partnership makes strategic sense." She observed him with playful skepticism. "And the fact that it means we'll have to work together officially is just a coincidence. A happy coincidence," he admitted, leaning slightly toward her, but maintaining appropriate distance for the workplace. "I missed seeing your brilliant brain in action in meetings. You were incredible today." "It was terrifying," confessed Sarah, "but in a good way." The wind tousled her blonde hair, and for a moment they simply appreciated the view of the city, side by side, each lost in their own thoughts. "I got a call from my mum today," Sarah finally said. "She finally accepted our invitation to dinner." Michael turned to her, genuinely surprised and visibly nervous. "Really? After 6 months of refusing?" "She's stubborn," Sarah smiled. "She wanted to be sure you weren't just another playboy having fun with her daughter before going back to your kind of people, as she says." "And what convinced her otherwise?" "I think it was time. Or maybe the fact that I was promoted to junior analyst without your interference." Sarah briefly touched his hand. "She's protective, Michael. She's seen many women in our community be used and discarded by men from higher classes." Michael nodded, understanding. "I'll do my best to show her that my intentions are serious." "Just be yourself," Sarah replied. "The man I fell in love with, not the intimidating CEO everyone fears." That night would mark a new chapter in their story. The meeting between worlds that until then had remained separate. Sarah's mother, Mrs. Linda Johnson, was a strong woman who had raised 3 children alone, working as a cook in family homes. Her judgment would be merciless, her approval difficult to win. Do you think Michael will be able to win the trust of Sarah's mother? What cultural and social barriers will still need to be overcome for their relationship to be fully accepted by both families? The restaurant chosen for dinner was Sarah's suggestion. Neither too sophisticated to intimidate her mother, nor too casual to seem like Michael wasn't taking the meeting seriously. A place known for its good American food, welcoming atmosphere, and accessible location. Mrs. Johnson arrived punctually, dressed in her best outfit, a navy blue ensemble that Sarah recognized from graduations and important family weddings. Her grey hair was carefully arranged, and her gaze, sharp as always, instantly assessed Michael. "So you're the man who turned my daughter's head," were her first words, direct and without beating around the bush, as Sarah had expected. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," replied Michael, extending his hand respectfully. "Sarah talks a lot about you." "I imagine she does," she replied, accepting the greeting with a firm handshake. "I hope she told you that I didn't raise my daughter to be anyone's plaything." "Mom!" exclaimed Sarah, mortified. "It's okay," Michael smiled, seeming genuinely calm in the face of the woman's frankness. "You're right. To be cautious. In your place, I would be too." That response seemed to slightly surprise Mrs. Johnson, who had expected defensiveness or condescension. The dinner proceeded with a conversation that, although initially tense, gradually became more natural. Michael talked about his own family, the father who had started from nothing, the mother who had passed away when he was a teenager, the values of hard work and integrity that had shaped his worldview. "My father always said that character doesn't come printed on a dollar bill," he commented as they shared a dessert. "I've met a lot of rich people without any character, and a lot of simple people with more dignity than any millionaire could buy." Mrs. Johnson studied him carefully before responding. Your father seemed to be a sensible man. He would have adored you, Michael replied sincerely. You two have a lot in common, especially the ability to see through appearances. When the evening ended, Sarah accompanied her mother to the taxi that Michael had called. Mrs. Johnson held her daughter's hands tightly. He seems different, she admitted in a low voice, so only Sarah could hear. Not what I expected. And is that good or bad? Asked Sarah, anxious for the approval that meant so much to her. Mrs. Johnson smiled, the same smile that Sarah had inherited. It's good. But remember, daughter, time is the best judge of character. He passed the first test, but life will have many others. On the way back to Sarah's apartment, a new place, closer to work, though still modest by her own choice, Michael seemed relieved. Your mother is amazing, he commented. Now I understand where your strength comes from. She liked you, replied Sarah, leaning over to kiss him briefly, which, believe me, is a miracle. She never approved of any of my previous boyfriends. I should feel honored then. You should, laughed Sarah, but she also made it clear that she'll kill me if I drop out of college to become a businessman's lady. Michael laughed, but there was seriousness in his eyes when he replied, I would never ask that of you. Your professional future is as important as our relationship. Arriving at the apartment, they sat on the small balcony that had been the main reason Sarah had chosen the place. From there, they could see a piece of the New York skyline, the city lights creating an almost magical scene in the night. You know what I'm thinking? Michael asked after a moment of comfortable silence. I'm thinking about how our lives have changed since that rainy night on Fifth Avenue. He intertwined his fingers with hers. If you had refused my ride, or if you had been honest about being the CEO right from the start, teased Sarah. Touché. Michael smiled. But perhaps things happened exactly as they should have. We needed that moment of equality. No titles, no social positions, just two people sharing coffee and conversation. Sarah nodded. Understanding. I think you're right. If I had known who you were from the beginning, I probably would have kept my distance. I had many prejudices too. And now? Now I know that titles don't define who we are, she replied, repeating the words he had said that night at the cafe so many months ago. Only what we choose to do with them. Michael pulled her closer, kissing her softly under the stars of New York. The future would still bring challenges. Different worlds don't merge easily. And there would always be more barriers to overcome, more tests to pass. But at that moment, it was enough to know that they had found each other despite all odds. Two hearts, two worlds, one story that would continue to be written, not despite their differences, but enriched by them.